Allegations that South Africa supplied weapons and ammunition to Russia in its war against Ukraine have raised many questions. Government says a retired judge will chair an independent inquiry into the allegations by the U.S. ambassador to South Africa, Reuben Brigety. According to Brigety, South Africa provided arms to Russia through a Russian ship that docked at the Simonstown Naval Base in Cape Town in December last year. And on the day the U.S. allegations emerged, Open Secrets released a report on how South African businesses and international corporations sold arms used in the Rwandan Genocide. Well, Open Secrets is an independent African civil society organization which holds the profiteers of economic crime, human rights abuses and war to account through investigative research, advocacy and the law. On the agenda now, we talk to Michael Marchant, who's the head of investigations at Open Secrets. Michael, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for giving us your time. I think before we even get into some of your investigations around South African organizations involved, even in what you say, our involvement even in the Rwandan genocide. Let's get back to the story now. The U.S. ambassador to South Africa, Brigety, essentially makes these allegations. Were you surprised when you heard them? Let's start there.
Well, I think good morning and good morning to the viewers. I think surprising in the sense that it is always surprising to see such a strident comment from an ambassador. It's not something that you regularly see with international relations, and it goes to show the extent to which those countries are very concerned about South Africa's role. However, I don't think it's entirely surprising to think that South Africa were perhaps loading weapons on that ship and that it was going to Russia. I think that since the story has broken, and the steadfast refusal of the ministers and the politicians responsible for the trade to answer any questions, claiming that they don't have documents and then 6 months later going dead silent, seems to be indicative that something happened there. And so I think the allegations seem entirely plausible. And I think it's something that we've likely known for a long time.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the role that the South African government really played here and really what should be communicated. I mean, it was last year, towards the end of last year, when the question was asked to the Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, Thandi Modise, by leader of the opposition around really what the Armaments Corporation of South Africa's role is in supplying weapons to Russia. And her response essentially saying that the ambit of what happens in her department, particularly in the space of AMSCO, really is, as she says, protected by confidentiality clauses, and it relates to security information where unauthorized disclosure may cause serious implications to the national security. I mean, what do you make of that response? What does the public make of the transparency that we're getting from government?
Well, I think that kind of answer is an attempt to hide behind national security concerns very broadly defined, but it doesn't fit precisely with the constitutional requirements of our state and the requirements that are contained in many laws in our country. I think what is perhaps most important for all South Africans to remember at this moment is that South Africa's law is absolutely clear on the export of weapons. No company or body can export weapons from South Africa anywhere without a permit that is approved by a cabinet body called the National Conventional Arms Control Committee. Now, the defense minister, because they have an interest in this matter, don't sit on that committee, but a series of other ministers do, both from international relations to justice and a whole host of other departments. And so those ministers have to apply their minds to any application to export weapons. And that's why when the answer is we don't know what happened here, it's so perplexing, because either the state does know or laws were broken in this case, because secret arms shipments, in the dead of night, loading weapons onto a ship to send it overseas is not consistent with South Africa's legal requirements. And so, as much as the state tries to obfuscate and delay with a new investigation, they actually should admit to us that either they know precisely what happened and it was, everyone was involved in facilitating the trade, or the legal requirements were not met, and then possibly a criminal investigation would need to follow that. Yeah,
let's broaden the conversation here a little bit, Michael, and then talk a little bit about just where South Africa sits in its transparency around arms trades. I mean, you've done an investigation into South Africa's organization and how they've been involved even in the Rwandan genocide. Unpack that for us.
Yeah, so it is kind of linked to what I've just spoken about now in terms of the new transparency requirements in democratic South Africa. We released a report yesterday, the timing of which could be fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, about a man by the name of Willem Ter's-Ehlers. He was P.W. Botha's private secretary in the 1980s. And in 1994, just 2 months after the democratic election here, he facilitated a clandestine weapons trade where he helped move weapons from the Seychelles to the DRC and ultimately into Rwanda. And he sold those weapons for millions of dollars at the time to the Rwandan government. And we believe that those weapons were used in the Rwandan genocide. Now, his ability to do that at that period was because he was embedded in the networks of apartheid that had moved weapons around the world in secret for many decades, but also because at that time there wasn't yet any new democratic era laws around transparency or issues of that nature. And I guess that takes me back to the point that I've just made, is that South Africa's new legal requirements are a direct response to our history of secrecy around arms deals, for one, but also our history around complicity in crimes that happen elsewhere. And so the legal order now is supposed to protect and stop exactly that type of trade. And yet, both in this case, but also repeatedly over the last 10 years with regards to other wars in place like Yemen, those contemporary laws unfortunately do not appear to be being applied.
Yeah, and just lastly, before I let you go, one thing that's, I think, glaring at us throughout this discussion is that South Africa is, of course, a signatory even of the Rome Statute. So where our relationship with Russia is concerned, we have a lot to really think about here. What are the implications if it is found that indeed that ship did leave South Africa armed for the purposes of Russia to use in this war in the Ukraine? What are the implications of what we face on the world stage?
Well, I think for one, there will be, as we're already seeing, there'll be severe consequences from the perspective of a diplomatic fallout and the potential economic and political consequences of how this has angered many powerful countries in the world. I think that from our perspective, even possibly more concerning than that is that this shines a light on the fact that South Africa, if the system is not working as it should, risks being complicit in a range of crimes, war crimes and crimes against humanity, not just in the Ukraine, but in a whole range of places around the world. And the problem is that the arms dealers and middlemen that facilitate these types of deals, they don't care where the weapons are going as long as they're making money out of it. And so I think that's the major lesson that we need to take from this, is that we need to implement the laws that are in place properly, and we need to hold those people to account where those laws were violated.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Michael Marchant, there, Head of Investigations at Open Secrets. A really big story, and of course, we're taking your thoughts on it as well on Twitter, @theagenda_SABC. And the question we're asking is, should South Africa be transparent around arms transactions?